I think this is part 13 in the study on Revelation, looking at the pictures of hope, joy, and comfort that John is painting in this book for us. We're in the second vision still. John has been called up into God's throne room. He's seen the 7 seals opened, and now we've heard the 7 trumpets sound. John has also been called up to receive the sweet-tasting scroll and told to continue prophesying. From there, in Revelation 11, we move on to the ministry of the controversial 2 witnesses. There's a lot of disagreement and a lot of speculation about the 2 witnesses in Revelation 11 as to their identity. John has just been given the little scroll, and he's been told by Jesus that he is to prophesy to all nations, peoples, and kings. Then the true temple of Christianity is measured and preserved. And following this, the Christian witnesses are seen prophesying in Jerusalem. The temple, altar, and city are still in existence here at this time, although the futurists would say that this is a rebuilt reality in the future. These witnesses have the powers of Moses and Elijah, in that they turn water to blood, bring darkness, and withhold the rains, for instance. The fire coming from their mouths is that of prophecy. This is just what God had given Jeremiah when he announced his judgment on Jerusalem more than 600 years prior to this. Jeremiah 5:14, "Because of that, the Lord, the God who rules over all, said to me, because these people have spoken like this, I will make the words that I put in your mouth like fire, and I will make this people like wood." In history, and as foretold in the Bible, there was a 3.5-year Elijah-like drought in Israel, immediately preceding the fall of Jerusalem. In fact, in his history, The Jewish Wars, Josephus writes, "And as for Titus, those springs that were formerly almost dried up when they were under your power, since he is come, run more plentifully than they did before. Accordingly, you know that Siloam, as well as all the other springs that were without the city, did so far fail that water was sold by distinct measures." The Jewish Wars 5:9-4. Kenneth Gentry Jr. says that the most probable view of the 2 witnesses is in reference to a small Christian witness in Jerusalem at the time. There's perhaps literally 2 people. This he says on his blog, Postmillennial Worldview, The 2 Witnesses of Revelation. Hank Hanegraaff sees the witnesses as a cumulative witness of all believers over time, and not referring to any particular person or persons. In keeping with the Moses, Elijah, or the law prophet view, Jesus does say in the parable in Luke 16 that Jerusalem has Moses and the prophets to witness to them, even though they will not believe, even when he rises from the dead. Jesus also says that it is Moses who accuses those who do not believe in him in John 5. So the law and the prophets absolutely do witness, and they could be in view here. Nor does Hank Hanegraaff's view preclude Gentry's. The 2 witnesses can be the witness of scriptures or the witness of Christianity itself, as indicated by the eating of the little scroll, and still represent the witnesses of 2 or more individual Christians speaking about the scriptures. Just as we can connect Revelation to Moses and the Exodus through the revelation language on Mount Sinai, the judgments of Egypt being enacted upon Jerusalem, and the rescue motif, it can also be found in the Gospel of John. As in Revelation, John's Gospel is very concerned with Jesus' identity as the prophet like Moses, the Mosaic Messiah, the law court imagery, and the establishing of authority. Echoing the multiple signs in Revelation, the Gospel of John likewise presents 7 signs to prove Jesus' identity. That motif of 7 identifying witnesses is common in both books. Also, both of his books state that we are blessed for either hearing or believing, and expect us to listen to and believe them. Because of the focus on Moses and on the Exodus, it's worth noting that Moses and Aaron in those books resemble the beasts of Revelation 13 and on, in that Moses is as God to Pharaoh, and Aaron is his prophet. In Revelation, the sea beast is a god to Jerusalem and to the world, and the Jewish religious establishment is his false prophet. These 2 are the antithesis of Moses and Aaron in Exodus, but they are also contrasted to the 2 witnesses in Revelation itself. These beasts, the 2, may have a mirror image in the 2 faithful witnesses as well. In conjunction with these Exodus-Revelation connections, I viewed not just the beasts, but also the 2 witnesses as something of a recapitulation of Moses and Aaron. Moses and Aaron are the law and prophet in their situation, and this is how the 2 witnesses have often been viewed. In fact, they're often thought of as Moses and Elijah, representatives of law and prophet. This could make the Moses, Elijah, or law, Moses, prophet, Aaron connection to the 2 witnesses even stronger. Finally, we are taught of two witnesses being the juridical standard since Moses. Moses said a matter of dispute in the law is settled on the testimony of two or more witnesses, and that we are not to decide a matter on the word of a single witness. This comes into Jesus' teachings when he says to take someone with you to confront your brother who has offended you. This is seen to be a reference to the requirement of two witnesses to attest to the truth of the case. Jesus then says that wherever there are two or more Christians gathering in his name, he will be there among them. This somewhat confusing saying is often used to teach that when we gather to worship him, Jesus is among us in spirit. Others deny this interpretation. They say that it is actually referring to the discipline case mentioned immediately prior, and that Jesus is present with the two or more in order to ratify the findings and veracity of the two witnesses who come in his name. With that in mind, we can look again at Revelation's two witnesses and notice that since they have come in Jesus' name, perhaps it is the presence of Jesus with them that empowers them. This could be a reference to his being with them in their condemnation of Jerusalem, as well as in their death and their vindication. This again could be consistent with a specific reference to two or more Christians, a given body of believers in Jerusalem, persecuted, killed, and lifted up, or even to a general statement about Jesus being with his worshippers when they stand strong in his name. As an interesting aside on the duality of witnesses, we also know that Jesus was condemned in the court of the Sanhedrin on the testimony of two false witnesses. They were such bad witnesses, these two false ones, that their testimony did not even agree. In his parable of the vineyard, Jesus is the son of the vineyard owner, the heir to the vineyard, who is killed and thrown out by the corrupt tenants. This is the crime that causes him to come back and destroy those tenants who killed the prophets and the heir. This parable was a warning and a prophecy to the Jewish leaders who had killed the prophets and were soon to kill Jesus. This was also foreshadowed in the Old Testament when Ahab and Jezebel had Naboth killed in order to take his vineyard at Jezreel. Jezebel set him up by having two false witnesses, one on either side of him, just like the thieves on either side of Jesus at the cross, testifying against him. On this false testimony, she and Ahab, another precursor to the two beasts, I think, kill him and take his vineyard. Having done so, they became guilty and were judged and killed. Ahab was wounded by the army of the Syrian Ben-Hadad and bled to death. Jezebel and the rest of their descendants were killed and cut off by Jehu, ending their dynasty and giving Israel over to a new order. This is very similar to what happened to the Jewish leadership who used false witnesses like Jezebel did to condemn Jesus like she did Naboth. The Jewish leaders then took on the guilt of his blood themselves. Like Ahab, they were killed and a new order was founded, the new covenant. While condemned by those two false witnesses, Jesus now sends two true witnesses to condemn Jerusalem. Another example of two witnesses may be seen in the angels in Luke's Passion narrative. The other synoptics mention that there was an angel at the empty tomb after Jesus was resurrected, but it's only Luke, along with our other author in the Gospel of John, who specifies that there were actually two angels. Some consider this to be a contradiction between the Gospels, but of course, one angel speaking in the other Gospels is completely compatible and harmonizable with two being present in Luke's Gospel. But why Luke mentions both when the others don't is unclear and somewhat mysterious. Part of the answer might be found in his second volume, the Book of Acts of the Apostles. Here our hearts delight to see that Jesus, as the two angels had witnessed to at the tomb, has returned to his disciples and has been teaching them for 40 days. At the end of those 40 days, he takes them out to the Mount of Olives and leaves them once again. This time he ascends in the clouds to heaven. He is the Son of Man of Daniel. As the disciples stand there looking into the sky after Jesus, two angels appear. These might just be the exact same two witnesses from Luke 24. Again, the angels ask, "What are you looking for?" He has gone to heaven, and he will return as you have seen him leave. These two angels in Acts are faithful witnesses. They met the women at the tomb and said Jesus would be back from the dead, and then he spent 40 days with them. Now they see the Son of Man going to the throne room of God in the clouds, and the angels say he will be back. We can trust the testimony of these two witnesses who have already proved true. From this time on, the disciples embark on the Great Commission. They are empowered by the Spirit, and they convert the world to Christianity, facing persecutions and often being martyred for their faith. In this, they rejoice because they know the message of revelation. They are conquering by the blood of the Lamb. and when they persevere in faith, Jesus accepts their spirits into heaven. In Revelation 10, John is given the little scroll and instructed to continue with the Great Commission. The two angels, messengers in the Greek language, witness to the apostles and prepare them for this stage of the kingdom growth. It is a witnessing stage which is ongoing to today, of course. Then two witnesses appear again during the siege in Jerusalem and convert the remnant of Jews from that city before Jesus brings his judgment on the great city. The appearance of the two witnesses here is at the time of the judgment. After the witnessing phase and spread of the gospel came the judgment on Jerusalem. Likewise, the Great Commission will not end until Jesus' second coming to judge all mankind and bring the final consummation of the kingdom. Even if it's not theologically significant, it's interesting to note that the two Gospels that mention both angels are the same two whose authors wrote sequels. Both of these authors wrote two books, two witnesses to the truth. Luke wrote about Jesus' birth, childhood, adult ministry, resurrection, 40 days of post-resurrection appearances, and then the 30 or so years of church growth after that. John 1:1 takes us all the way back to the beginning in eternity past and takes us through Jesus' earthly ministry. His sequel, Revelation, picks up where Luke Acts left off in the late AD 60s and follows the story through the climactic judgment on Jerusalem and the temple. He looks forward some to the fall of Rome, and then, as the Gospel of John started in the eternal past, Revelation finishes with a glimpse into the eternal future. Now that I've connected the two witnesses, however tenuously, to the two angels of the Gospels, one more striking parallel calls for attention. We can think of their witnessing, being not only they're bringing God's message to Jerusalem, like watchman Ezekiel shouting a warning from the wall, but also as they're acting as witnesses regarding Jerusalem's evil. We've seen this before, even in the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah, when Yahweh came down to see if their sins were as great as had been reported. He didn't enter the city, but the two angels with him did. When they got there, the inhabitants sought to do evil to them, and thus sealed their own fate. It was not this one sin for which they were being judged, as God had come for the purpose of confirming that his destruction was already warranted. The witnesses went in and confirmed firsthand that it was warranted. Then God, not the witnesses, destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Likewise, Jesus sent his two witnesses to Jerusalem to witness. Jerusalem then is figuratively called Sodom in Revelation. It was already condemned for having crucified the Messiah, but then these two witnesses also were killed in the great city. Jerusalem did not bring destruction upon herself through this one sin, but it provided confirming testimony as to the justice of the judgment to come. The two witnesses of Sodom and Gomorrah, who found only Lot and his family to spare, have an echo in the two spies that Joshua sent into the land of Canaan before the conquest. These two witnesses precede Joshua's entrance into the land when he crossed the Jordan River on the 10th day of Nisan, or Abib. This is the very same day that the other Joshua, that's Jesus in Greek, entered Jerusalem on a donkey, and which we celebrate as his triumphal entry. Joshua had sent two witnesses in to look Jericho over, entered on the 10th day, celebrated Passover, sealed and marked out Rahab and her family for salvation. This is in Joshua 2-7. And then he destroyed Jericho. When he blew his trumpet 7 times on the 7th day, the wall of the city fell flat. Jericho's wall was like Jerusalem in AD 70, where not one stone was left upon another. Then, just as the great city suffers near the end of Revelation, Joshua's army devoted Jericho to destruction. Everyone living in it was put to the sword, and the city was burned up. There's no way we can help but see the echoes of these chapters of Joshua in the passion narratives of the Gospels, and now again here in chapters 8-11 of Revelation. After his triumphal entry on the 10th of Nisan, Jesus celebrates Passover and becomes the ultimate Passover himself. He forewarns the rulers in the Olivet Discourse and then brings a very similar destruction in judgment on Jerusalem as Joshua had brought on Jericho. Both are reminiscent also of what befell Egypt as Moses left. Like Moses and Aaron, or Joshua's two spies, the two witnesses that Jesus sent perhaps found or perhaps saved the 144,000 and brought them out safely in their own Passover. When Joshua's two spies came to Jericho, they found Rahab there, and because she sided with them, she and her family were spared. Everyone who entered her house and came under the mark of the scarlet thread would be passed over when the judgment came. Everyone else would be destroyed. As Noah was sealed in the ark with his family, so was Rahab under her roof with hers. In Israel, in Revelation, 144,000 were sealed and protected from the ultimate destruction, which the two witnesses confirmed was warranted. The Passover theme comes to Rahab in Jericho, as it had come to Lot in Sodom, and as it does the 144,000 in Jerusalem. Again, we have the two witnesses and destruction tied via Passover back to Moses and the plagues on Egypt. To try to bring this full circle, we can look back at the law of Moses regarding the two witnesses. Notice that these are not primarily evangelists coming to a city to share God's word, but as in the case of the angels, they are witnesses who have a testimony against the accused. They are part of the legal proceedings, and their testimony is part of the diligent search for the truth regarding that report. Upon their testimony, the evil, abomination, or idolatry is confirmed, and the guilty party is to be put to death. This fits perfectly well with the situation of the two witnesses in Revelation. Deuteronomy 17 says, starting in verse 2, "If there is found among you, within any of your towns that the Lord your God is giving you, a man or woman who does what is evil in the sight of the Lord your God, in transgressing his covenant, and has gone and served other gods, and worshipped them, or the sun or the moon, or any of the hosts of heaven, which I have forbidden, and it is told you, and you hear of it, then you shall inquire diligently. And if it is true and certain that such an abomination has been done in Israel, then you shall bring out to your gates that man or woman who has done this evil thing, and you shall stone that man or woman to death with stones. On the evidence of two witnesses, or of three witnesses, the one who is to die shall be put to death. A person shall not be put to death on the evidence of one witness. The hand of the witnesses shall be first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. So you shall purge the evil from your midst." That was verses 2 to 7. In each case, the two true witnesses are mistreated or persecuted, and the cities are destroyed. This is a pattern of Jesus' crucifixion and death, leading to the destruction of the temple. At the end of the two witnesses' ministry in Revelation 11, with their death at the hands of the beast from the abyss, comes the destruction of Jerusalem. This is the second woe announced, and the third is soon to come. The first woe immediately preceded it and was seen in the demonic plague in Jerusalem during the siege. Finally, I want to turn again to Paul Blackham for one more set of witnesses to see how this relates to those circa AD 67 to 70 and to the church today. Quoting Blackham, "Yet, this faithful witness is not simply a matter of human strength or insight. In Revelation 11:4, we are reminded of Zechariah 4, when two olive trees provided a constant supply of olive oil through two arms of the lampstand. The two witnesses of that time, Zerubbabel the king and Joshua the high priest, were told that they could only shine as a lamp in their rebuilding project if they leaned on the strength of the Holy Spirit. So the original pattern of Moses and Elijah is applied to Zerubbabel and Joshua, proving that their pattern of witness is a model for the church in every age. In the pattern of these two faithful witnesses, the church will be given power to witness, even the authority to call down further plagues and destruction on the earth. 11:6. We have seen how the prayers of the church bring about the destructive judgments from heaven. Chapter 6, verse 10, chapter 8, 3 through 5. And so again, the power of the church to call down judgments through our prayers is affirmed. Though the church will make this powerful testimony to the judgment and redemption of the Lord Jesus, yet it will not be received with faith or joy. Rather, we are given a warning of the beast, the devil, that comes up from the abyss in verse 7, who organizes the world in violent, deadly opposition against the local churches. In fact, the opposition to the church's witness will be so savage that it will seem as if the church's witness will have been silenced. Verses 7 through 10. That's Paul Blackham in Book by Book.